Y'all, I am excited to have this conversation with Danni White today. Danni and I are going to be briefly discussing the diversity deficit in publishing, because there's definitely one, not just on the side of publishing, but also in the stories that are being told. And so when she hops on, we are going to talk about that for a little bit, because for some of you that's been following me for a while, you would know that I started Chestnut Publishing House about, I would say, 2 years ago now. Hey boo. Hey Ange. And although I have enjoyed it and poked around and discovered what I like to do and what I don't enjoy so much, which is part of every process, right? I have seen a huge deficit in publishing, and I think that there's more room for not just Black publishers and not just publishers of color, but also sending you love too. But also, when we talk about diversity, it's not just race and it's not just gender, it's all abilities. We're just talking about stories, right? There needs to be a very diverse spectrum of stories and gatekeepers as far as publishers to help tell those stories. I'm waiting on Danni, but as you can see, let me invite her. These little drawings from my little Hannah back here be helping me out. How have you been? Miss you. We gotta get together and go get some coffee, or maybe not coffee, maybe drinks and dinner. Coffee is somewhat overrated, even though I need it like crazy. But I know everybody gets tired of meeting up for coffee. So let's see. Let's see if Danni sees this. But while I'm waiting on her, I want to hear from everybody, and it would be really awesome if we can get some feedback from everybody on the diversity deficit in publishing. We really want to be able to hear from you guys. What stories would you like to be told? That's very important, right? And as I said before, diversity just does not just include gender and race, because a lot of times when you hear that, that's what people talk about, and that's what they think about. But we would like to tell diverse stories, across the board diverse stories, and from the people that actually experience those things. So hey Jessica. So for example, I was speaking to an author the other day who would love to hear stories pretty much told authentically from the culture that he is a part of. Love that, right? What you're a part of. Or like Jess, who's on here. Jess is actually a Chestnut author. She's writing children's books to not only teach children how to be kind to other kids with disabilities, or as we say, of all abilities, but also how to teach adults to be kind, because we also need those lessons as well. So, hi, Karen. So that's what Danni and I are talking about today. We actually need more diversity in publishing across the board, more stories to be written. I love Karen's book. Karen's book is coming out super soon, Speaking from the Scar. And I love the story that she's telling, which is her personal story and how she overcame sexual abuse. And we cannot wait for you guys to be able to read that. There goes Danni. And actually share, there it is, be inspired to share your own stories too. Let's see. I think I did the right thing, Danni. Hey, Danni.
Hello, friend. How are you?
Oh my
Let
gosh.
me see if I can get a better lighting here.
I was just I was kind of rambling along, but I told you, I texted you and told you, man, today has been a day. I have been running around the world today.
Yes, on the day when we actually have to do something.
I
Happen?
know.
Yes.
I
Which is
was in traffic and was like, okay, I'm still in traffic, but yeah,
yeah.
this conversation was important. So I was just kind of giving everybody an overview of what we're talking about, and we won't hold everyone long, but I think it's an important conversation about the deficit as far as diversity goes in publishing and explaining. Like for me, it's not just race and gender, and I know we've talked about this. It's all abilities. It's just a plethora of different things because many stories need to be told. You want to introduce yourself and talk about your publishing company?
Absolutely. Hi everyone. I am glad to be joining Keocha here. We met a couple of, well, maybe 2 months ago now, I think, through a group and a Slack channel that we're both in. And I feel like it's cool that we're both getting to make this connection and be able to create this video and this place for everyone. But anyway, I'm in Dallas, Texas. I own a digital media company as well as a digital publishing company, which this is what we're talking about today, DW Creative Publishers. We publish books, ebooks, journals, planners, pretty much anything that people want to write. We help you get your story out into the world. And so I definitely think that one of the big things that is happening is that a lot of people who are different races, like African Americans, Asians, Indians, like we have a lot of unique stories to tell and a lot of information to share from our perspective.
Mm-hmm.
As we've talked about, like the publishing industry is very very much run by white people. So
Mm-hmm.
to change some of that.
Yeah, and I think it's important, and it's so funny too because I've had conversations with some other publishers who are white that I'm really cool with, and they say, you know what, even they notice it.
Yes.
They're like, you know what, there is a deficit and there needs to be more stories. And I love the fact that they embrace that and want to be a part of that in some kind of way. Because I think I put this in the caption, but who wants to be told the same stories? Like embracing diversity really enriches storytelling because we have so much to learn from each other. Don't you
Yes.
agree?
We absolutely have a lot to learn from each other. And I think the more rooms and spaces that we open up to have these conversations and to learn and allow people to share their stories, the more opportunities that open up for everybody, right? And the more understanding that we can get as as individuals, as a culture, as a society, and the better we can start, treating each other and treating, people in our communities. Because with more
Mm-hmm.
understanding, more opportunity a lot of times. So, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and it's one of the things that's so crazy because one of the things that I love with having Australian authors. So I have two new authors that are both from Australia, and I've learned so much, especially from one of she wrote. Jess, I don't know if she's still on here, but she wrote a children's book. It's there are animals, and it's about kids with all abilities, right? But I'm learning so much about Australia in those stories. I had a conversation with someone, and I shared this a little bit earlier before you hopped on, who is Latina and was sharing that she wished there were more opportunities for Latinas to tell authentic stories. And so that's why Danni and I connected on that quickly because we were like, hey, first of all, we're both Black publishers. Don't really see us that much. That's pretty cool. So that means there's more of us
Yeah,
that are out there, and just talking about having holding space for more people to do the same, to become a publisher, to write a book, to tell your story in a unique way.
absolutely. I think that there are a lot of stories out here that we don't get to hear just because the space is not available for them to tell. Like we connected really because we don't see a lot of in this industry, right? And so it's awesome to hear that like there is another African American female who's owning her own publishing company, who's helping people tell stories, things like that. And I think the more that we talk about it, the more that people start to understand, okay, there is a space for this. There are people out here that want to hear my story and that can be impacted by my story. And maybe it can inspire them to start telling it. telling it more, because once you start telling one story, you find out oftentimes that there are a lot of other stories behind that, a lot of sub stories that can be told. So.
Exactly. And I love that you said this, because I say this all the time. People will say to me, they'll just be like, well, nobody wants to read my story. And I'm like, there is a reader for every story. Somebody wants to read your story. Not even just want to read it. Some people need to read your story. They need to be able to connect with you and say, because diversity too, to me, really is also in the stories.
Right.
When you look at the industry and then you look at everything and say, well, these are the stories people are telling now. Okay, well, there's enough people telling that story. You can go completely out of the box, color outside of the lines on purpose if that's what you want to do, and tell the story in a unique way to bring, some diversity to the storytelling as well. I think that's also important.
Absolutely. I think one of the things that, like, I've heard often is that the fiction genre is like overrun by stories that are already have been told or whatnot. And I always try to encourage people that everybody has a different perspective. Like, we are all living in this world, but we're all living a different life, right? And so to share your story or your perspective about the same thing actually matters, because you never know who on the other side of those pages can resonate with your story. So I feel like a lot of times in our communities, like, our voices generally have been silenced by what is going on in the culture, what is going on in society, and we kind of have to, like, fight our way forward for our heard, right? And so some of that really does come from, like, understanding that your voice is powerful, whether you think it or don't think it. Like, your voice is powerful, your perspective is powerful on a particular subject, and the different subjects that you have, right? More people can be able to share those stories and perspectives, and then it can help people who are coming up, this new generation of people that are coming up. Like, there's not just one perspective for a particular subject.
Very true. And also that makes me think of even like, not culturally, but regionally, where you live, right? So like in Louisiana, people think everybody from Louisiana is the same. And it's like, no. So if I lived with my grandparents in, South Louisiana, and someone lived with theirs in North Louisiana, their experiences are going to be different, because yeah, we all live in the same state and we all kind of cooped into this culture, but the cultures are different. So your story needs to be told, because then there's something in your story that's going to be different from somebody else's story, and that's what make it unique.
Unique, exactly.
Yeah. That's what makes it unique. And it can be extremely frightening to be vulnerable enough to tell your story, but somebody needs to hear it. And I love that you said that the next generation, because the kids need to too. I was just telling somebody the other day, they were like, I want it, because this is a big thing, and I know a lot in our community, right? You want to write a book, but then you don't want to tap into your parents' part of the story. You're like, I want to tell my story, but then then your mom is like, why are you writing that? No, don't, you know what I'm saying? And I was just telling somebody, I'm like, put it in a children's book. Change the name of the characters. Change the outcome. It doesn't have to be exactly, use your creativity. You don't have to say, well, I did this and then my mom did that. Because I get that generationally too. There's a difference on telling your business, because a book in that sense would be like telling your business. But be creative enough to do it in a way that still facilitates healing, and it gives you an outlet to let things go.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to realize too that we're not sharing our stories just for us. We're going to write, and we're going to publish, and we're going to share stories. We're really sharing it for the people around us to be impacted. Because if it was just for us, it kind of really wouldn't matter, right? If I've learned that in writing books, writing devotionals, writing journals, writing things like that, if it speaks to me and it matters to me, it also will matter to someone else. Like, there are 8 billion people in the world,
right,
are living the same life in just different regions, different ages, different years, things like that, that people don't realize, people don't understand.
Yeah, it's not just for, but in that sense, it's almost like, I remember my grandfather used to say this: we don't really live for ourselves, we live for other people. Yeah. Your life is really a testament of strength and endurance and resilience, and even pain and purpose. Like, it's it's this roller coaster ride of things, but people are watching you, and even if even if you feel like no one's watching you, someone's inspired by you, or those types of things. So a book is a great way to, I don't know, it's just something powerful about that, and that's why we need everybody's voices. That's why we need more of our voices too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think reading in general, like reading is one of the things that I know there are a lot of organizations that try to help students with, right? Because reading is not just fundamental, reading is necessary, right, for existing in the world. You can't really thrive without knowing how to read. And I feel like that's just a fundamental basis of the publishing industry, right? We're not just telling stories, but we're also creating a space for younger children, younger learn how to read, to not just read, but also to comprehend what they're reading as well, right? That's a big thing too. And I mean, I think that there's still a lot of opportunity for this industry to grow and to be more diverse. But I think it starts with conversations like these, us acknowledging like there is a deficit in this industry, right? But how do we go about changing it? Like, how do we go about making a positive impact? How do we go about implementing new strategies or new initiatives to make things different?
Yeah.
A larger part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I look forward to continuing that, because one of the things, y'all, that we would really love for y'all to do is to give us feedback.
Yes.
And join in on the conversation, because what do you think initiatives should be? What do you think publishers should offer? What is the biggest hurdle for telling your story? Is it the financial piece? Is it you don't feel you hadn't found a space yet where you feel comfortable enough for someone to tell your stories because there's not enough diversity, so you don't see anybody like you and you don't think that the publisher would resonate with the story? Like, what's the biggest hurdle for you? Why are you not publishing? And it's so funny because recently I don't know if I told you this, but I've started kind of gravitating towards empowering people to self-publish, because I'm like, look, if you don't feel like you're not comfortable with somebody, and I'm actually moving more in that area as we are switching over to publishing more in-house.
Right.
But I'm like, hey, if you need the tools to be able to do it yourself, come on, let's talk about it. Let me empower you, because then that's a new skill, right? And if they decide at some point they want to become a publisher for other people, then you have the connections, the skill, the know-how to do that. But it's all about empowering each other.
Yes, I think for us as owners of publishing companies, right? I think that's one of the things that it's important to teach, because ownership is a big piece of the publishing conversation. If you're going traditional publisher, let's just like walk through the timeline, right? So first, someone has to tell you that your story is good enough to be published. Okay, that's intimidating in and of itself, because your story matters to you. Like whatever you're writing, whether it's a nonfiction book, a fiction book, a journal, or anything, your story matters to you. It's something that you have personally put your mind, your blood, sweat, tears, everything. You bore everything onto that sheet of paper. For someone to tell you, an agent in the traditional world, it's literary agents, for them to tell you that your book is not good enough to be published is defeating in and of itself. It's very frustrating, right? So by the time you get there, it's like 18 months is already from the production of the manuscript, only to tell you that no one's going to accept it. Then once you finally get accepted by a publisher, most times you have to turn over your rights to the publishing company for X amount of years. It could be an infinite number of years, right? You have no leverage to turn your story into a movie or a feature film. You have no leverage to create sub-books based upon that one book, right? You can't do anything else with that because you don't own the rights anymore. And so I think the ownership of your work is a very big part of the conversation. And I do think that's why a lot of people are scared to publish, because they don't understand the copywriting and the trademarking process. They don't understand that, yes, there are protections for you, for someone not to steal your work, right? And don't have to go to a traditional publisher only to be told that your work isn't good enough for them, right? You also don't have to wait so long for your royalties. Like a lot of times in traditional publishing, you're not going to see royalties for several years.
Mm-hmm.
The publisher is going to work in its own best interest, right? To make sure that they have their revenue first before they even cut you a check. So I feel like in that sense, self-publishing is really empowering. But then for smaller publishers like us, yeah, I feel like it's imperative for us to be the ones that actually train and provide information and not be gatekeepers of that information, right? To
Yes.
us, self-publishing is simple, like, oh, you just do it, right? But to a lot of people, it's very, very intimidating. And so they don't know the ins and outs of like graphic design or book cover design or interior layout. They don't know
Mm-hmm.
sizes and they don't know how to work with a printer. All of that stuff can feel very intimidating. So I think for us, and part of like closing that gap in publishing is the knowledge and the information. Like, I think there's a verse in the Bible that says, our people suffer because
Lack
of
of
lack of knowledge.
knowledge. Yeah.
Not just about doing the thing, it's about the knowledge behind it. And so for me, it's a lot of times it's about educating a lot
Yeah.
of authors and a lot of our people who are getting into the process and they want to write a book. It's more about the education piece than it is about just upselling you on something like, oh yes, we can publish your book. I want you to know like the process, so when you get ready to do it again and again and again,
Mm-hmm.
easier over time. And you're not just a writer, but you're now a designer. You're now a publisher. You're now a distributor. Like, you understand the full life cycle of publishing. So
Yeah, that ownership, you own it.
exactly.
Because it's one thing. I mean, that's even with kids, right? When you're making a decision, we started doing this like long time ago. I think Danny, it dropped off, and she's gonna come back on. But it's very important to give kids ownership in things that concern them as well. Because there's nothing better. There's nothing. Oh, there it goes. You left, but there's nothing better than having that ownership. And also, I think one of the things too that I also enjoy about self-publishing, so once you have that knowledge and you have that confidence, that creative like flow that you get, because once you publish with a traditional publisher and you lose all the things that you mentioned, right? Creatively, what that can do to you. I think I've seen a couple of people kind of go through, oh, well, I did all the hard work of writing it and now I just turned it over, and now so there's no ownership and you don't have creative rights, because they can say, no, this chapter needs to come out, and guess what? It's going to come out because you no longer own it. So when you give up ownership, you also give up the creative rights to do whatever you envision. Or it also, not even if you envision it, because sometimes it takes a while for things to come full circle, right? You go, well, I don't really know what to do with that. I can sit on it for a while. You can do that when you have ownership. But when you don't have ownership, you're getting told what's happening with
Yeah.
that. Yeah, it's like, no, 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 no. We need this tomorrow, right? But if it's yours and you have the ownership, you said, no, I need to sit on this about 2 more months. I'm gonna come back to it. I'm gonna go to something else, and you actually dictate how it runs. But that education piece is very important. I think us actually being able to say to people, look, it's scary, and there's a lot of vulnerability that goes into it. You are not going to come into contact with all the right
Right.
people. That takes time. But you can do it, and you'll feel good doing it, and having people like us and other people too who are willing to say, hey, what do you need? Okay, well, let me tell you about that. This process goes like this. Oh, stay away from that. I think that's important for us to be there for
Yeah.
each other.
Yes, that is true. And I think even being the owner of a publishing company, I think there's also a balance between, okay, not being a gatekeeper
Mm-hmm.
and business as well, because a lot of people, they do just want to write. They don't want to do all the other pieces,
Right.
but they want to know what goes on. They don't want to be ripped off in the process. And I feel like self-publishing kind of has gotten a bad rap as like something that can just be done simply. And now people are out here upcharging people on book covers and upcharging people on layouts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing it in fits and starts, but not able to tell them like, okay, this is the entire life cycle of what you're going to get from start to finish. This is how it actually works. So
Yeah.
that piece is very important, and I think it's important for closing the gap within diversity in this industry, because it's very, very, it's very, very long. It's been going on for years, right?
Yeah.
Since this publishing company. But I think there are ways that we can not only get into the industry and not only bridge that gap between knowledge, information, and action, but also empower more people to be able to say, I also want to publish. I also want to get my work out there. Or even kids, like, I want to tell my story from
Yeah.
a child's perspective or from a high schooler's perspective, things like that. And then also that form of empowerment, and to your point about creative direction and having creative ownership, once they see their work come to life, it's one thing, a Word document on your computer. It's
Right.
have a like published book in your hands, right, with a book cover and an ISBN and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's a whole nother thing to see your book distributed and available on Amazon.com or Barnes and Noble, right? So that in and of itself leads to other products, right? And it leads to people being able to set up entire businesses based upon their creative intelligence, their creative work. So I feel like it's much broader than publishing
Mm-hmm.
in a lot of ways, but publishing, I feel, is like where it can start.
Yeah, I agree. And there's a misconception. Well, it used to be like that. So I don't, but I just want to tell y'all, when you self-publish, back a while ago, it was like, oh, if you self-publish, you can't get into a bookstore, you can't get into the library, you can't lies. That is no longer the case. You publish with a small publisher, whether you do it with a small publisher or you publish on your own, you can get into bookstores, you can get into libraries, and people like Danni and I who own publishing companies. That's what we're saying. We want to be able to show you how. We want to be able to talk you through how to do that, because we need your stories. Everyone needs your stories, whether they know it or not. This place would be, and this place as in this world would be super bland if only one story was told. Nobody wants to keep hearing the same story. We need to hear diverse voices. And I know diversity right now with everything DEI is now, it's starting to be like a little buzzword, and people, it's just kind of passing people by. But diversity is not an option. That we need that. And whether we want it or not, the world is diverse. There's no way to get around it. So you don't need to hold back on your stories. You actually need to voice it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you haven't discovered your voice yet, reach out to us. Either one of us would be more than happy to say, okay, what's your creative vision? This is what it is, but this is how I feel. Okay, let's work through that, because we need to hear your stories, and we want to. Not just need to, but we want to. We want to hear your stories.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. I mean, to our points earlier, like, ask questions. I think
Yeah.
sometimes it's hard to ask questions because, one, they don't know what questions to ask. That's first. But then two, they're afraid of like what the answer might be. And really, if you ask questions to the right people, you find the right people first to ask those questions to, they should be able to give you good direction, right? And you obviously you want to use your own discernment when you're asking questions, but yeah, there is a plethora of information out here about publishing, and how to get started is just a matter of like getting started in the right place. So I think that we are the right place.
We are the right place. And we actually have been talking about this, but without going into detail, we actually would love to start. We're building a community, really.
Yeah.
And we want to hear from, we want to hear from you. We want to be able to be, I hate to use the word mentors, because I feel like that's overused too, but I love
we're your partners in the publishing process.
We are
we're
partners.
We're your little community. Like, we're those people. We want to support you in the journey of publishing. It can be overwhelming and intimidating, but we're here for you.
Yeah, we are here for you. Thank you, Karen. And this is, as I am transitioning into, and I want to make this clear because everybody's going to start seeing this, as I'm transitioning into more of publishing in-house, which I'm super excited about. I'm gonna tell y'all, I'm probably gonna be on somebody's banned book list. Because I mean they're banning books for everything, right? Everything you talk about, whatever. But I'm very excited about that, and starting with children's books and really focusing on children's literacy. But as I'm transitioning into that, well, even though I'm transitioning into that, it does not mean that I still won't be available to answer questions. We're going to be doing some things together. We really want to hear from diverse voices about what is it that you need? What is it that you don't understand? What would you like to be more knowledgeable on? And guess what? If either one of us don't know, we'll pull in somebody who does.
Right.
I think expanding our territory is very important. Being able to connect with the right people, and sometimes the right people takes time. Not jumping on everything that I have definitely learned in business. Just kind of waiting, and when like you and I, it felt right, and so we were like, okay, this is good. You can feel it.
Yeah. That's what I'm
You
talking about when I say discernment. Like,
discernment.
don't listen to just the words people are saying. Like, listen to their spirit, listen to the energy that's coming along with it, because you didn't feel it. Like when it's the right connection, when it's the right person. So yeah.
Yeah, because everything starts to align, right? It's like it starts to fall in place when you're not impulsive. Don't rush it. And some of you have probably been sitting on a book for a long time. Guess what? When it's ready, it's going to be ready. But in the meantime, it's a good idea to start learning, start asking questions, get around people who are doing the same thing, that are like-minded, other creative people, not people who are just going to, because that's another thing too. When I first started this publishing company, thankfully, the person that I reached out to, I was in her an anthology that she had, and I sat with her. She's super creative, like real flowy, and I was just like, think about starting a publishing company. She's like, okay, what do you want to know? And nothing I said sounded crazy to her. It was very unique to me. It was different from what she was doing, but she embraced it and said, how can I support you?
Yeah.
When you get around people, if they get too businessy, and that's just me, like if they're just like you just said it's not all about upselling and all those. When you get around people, if they're too businessy and that's not really your vibe, then you probably don't want to go in that direction, because that's just not your thing. If you're more of a creative person and you like the flow, you still want to learn business, you still want to be knowledgeable, you still want to operate in your gifts, right? And you may or may not want to make money from it. And Danny talked about that, because a book, really, you can build upon that. Merch can come from it. Another book can come from it. A workbook, a journal, like you can do that. Some people don't want to do that. They just want to get out what they wrote, and they're fine with that. Whatever fits you, get around people and stay connected to people who will support your vision for it. Because if you're not ready for something or you don't want something, you don't have to feel forced. And that's what we're here for, to say, hey, we're holding space for you because we want to hear your stories and we want to support you in that. What do you need?
Yeah. And
So,
I think also this, in the process of discovering what you need, because again, like a lot of people might not know, like they know they want to, so is to have a published product, right? But a lot of you might not know exactly what you need, right? We're also holding that space as well to walk with you through the journey of figuring that out. Like, what does that look like for you, and what feels comfortable for you? What feels passionate for you? What feels non-pressured, non-stressed for you, right? Because publishing is not it doesn't have to be a stressful process. Like, it's self-publishing, the deadline is yours. You can say, I want to publish a book 5 years from now. Backwards through that process, right? But yeah, the open space, I think, is what is one way for us to start bridging that gap in diversity, and being resources, like the both of us, to people in our industry, and just guiding people in the way that they want to go, not the way that has been traditionally used for publishing, right?
I love that you said a couple of things. So guiding them in the way that they want to go, I truly wholeheartedly believe that. And also the no pressure part. You
Yes.
know, it really shouldn't be any pressure. And even financially, if it's not time financially for you to publish, guess what? You don't have to abandon your goals of publishing. Get with people who can say, okay, so here's how that can still happen. Here are different ways, because sometimes it's just exposure to
Different things.
different things. You'll look at things in publishing and they make it seem like it's just one way, and what we're telling you is that it's not one way. There are many different ways for you to do things, to have a high quality, beautiful cover, something attention grab. Like, there are ways to do it. There are people that are there to do it, and we just want to hold that space for you and be a resource for you to learn how.
Yes.
So Danni and I will be having more of these conversations, and we're going to talk about how to really get people together, because we want to be able to have like intimate conversations too, because we want to hear from you. And I mean, hear from you, yes, on the live, but I'm just curious to know. That's one question, I guess, for the next one, whoever's watching and watching the replay. If you have not published your book yet, why haven't you? Like, why? Share with us, why haven't you done it? What has been your hurdle? What has been your hesitation? What do you think is standing in your way? Is it other people? Is it finances? Is it, what is it? And let us know, because those are things that we can help address when we talk.
Absolutely. That's actually a good question, right? Because we might have something in our minds that might be the barrier, but it might be something completely different. So, yeah, we want to hear from you all, those who are listening, those who will watch the replay. What are those barriers? Like, what is keeping you back from having a published book? I mean, I like to tell people that book publishing and content creation is is a very spiritual process. It's very, if you think about the spirituality and like the Christian faith, or even the Muslim faith or Hindu faith, like, it's all by a book that was written centuries ago, right? And lives by those principles. So just think from a century from now, like, what do you want people to remember about you? What do you want them to remember about your thoughts? What do you want them to remember about any practical application for life that they can be following, right? It's not just about publishing a book, right? It's about the implication of that book for years and years and years after we're gone from this earth. So, like, keep that in mind too. It's not just about us. It's a very spiritual process,
Yes.
which is why I say it shouldn't be rushed. It shouldn't be stressed.
Take your time.
Your time, right? Like, you want to work with the right people who can take you through that process, right? And you want it to be your journey. So yeah, I feel like book publishing is a very godlike business.
Yeah, it is.
I definitely feel like closer to God when I'm doing this work. Because just think, like, he wrote a book, right? He left a book for all of us, right?
Yeah.
And every time I put out a book, whether it's my own or it's someone else's, I always feel just a little bit closer to heaven when I'm doing it. So.
I love that, because it is so heavenly. It feels so good to be able to hold space for people to do that. And for those of you who will say, well, I'm not really interested in publishing a book, but maybe a journal or an audiobook. If you're just in love with audiobooks and you're not really ready for print right now, or you love ebooks, it does not have to be it. But what we're saying is your story.
Sure. Yeah.
You tell your story. But I love that, a little closer to heaven, because it does feel that way. Like, with every launch, it feels like you're doing God's work. It feels like you're like, okay, how can I help this person discover, if they don't know it, discover their voice, discover their message, and then actually voice that and have the courage to do that, because it takes courage to release a book. I don't care what the book is about.
It really does. And even actually stand behind your story long after it's published, right?
It takes a lot of courage. Like, whether you're telling your personal story or you're telling about something, like it's nonfiction, and this is like in business, you're gonna have people that's gonna read it. That's the whole purpose for reviews. People read it, they give their opinions about it. It can be super scary, but I'm telling you that once you get that courage to release it, once you're like, you know what, I'm telling this story, It's just what Danny said. That is out there forever. Like that is a piece of you out into the world that you've taken a step, even though you were
Yeah,
afraid. Because courage is not the absence of fear. It's doing it even though you are
absolutely.
afraid. And you're saying, I'm going to do it anyway. So we definitely want to hold that space for you to be encouraged. And everybody's not going to like your book. You're not going to get the best reviews from everybody. And that's okay too. But I guarantee you, whether you hear from people or not about it, you're blessing somebody because they needed to hear that. And I realized that even on social media, I'll post things and then I'll get like a private message or a DM that says, I needed that. Thank you for that. So don't even look for public.
Acknowledge.
A lot of time, yeah. It sometimes it won't even come into public acknowledgement. It'll be in an event that you go to and you set up a table and somebody goes, oh my goodness, I really needed this book, or my kid really needed this book to see themselves in that book, which is why diversity is important.
Yeah. Yep.
So it takes courage, it takes community, it takes some vulnerability, which is why the courage pops in. But we are saying that we're here for you to answer any questions. And we would love for other self-publishers and publishers, diverse, just we need you we need your input. We need you also to help us build this community so people can see that they can do this.
And that people can also see that there are other people out there that look just like
Yeah.
you who are out there doing it too, right? And I feel like the more that we collaborate and the more we see other people doing it, the more information that goes out there, and the more other people that have not yet gone through this process, the more they will want to go through the process, right? Because it'll start to feel like they should, like it'll start to feel like something that they want to do, something that they should do because their peers are doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Peer pressure is also real.
Yeah, it is. And you know
Yeah.
what? And we are committed. And I know the good, the bad, and the ugly. I just had somebody ask me today would I mind sitting with her because she wants to start a publishing company. And I'm like, yeah. And I was like, but you're going to get the good, the bad, and the ugly from me.
It's not easy.
It's
Yeah.
not easy. And it's worth it, but it's not easy. And it's also, Danny mentioned at the very beginning about being knowledgeable, right? If we're just telling you all the good stuff that happens, then that you're not knowledgeable. You need to know everything. Yeah, you need to know what are the possibilities to help you prepare, not to scare you. Because some people don't like to hear, oh, well, no, it's not to scare you, but it's also to make you aware so that you know that everything that you encounter will not be rainbows and unicorns. Like it won't. And I think that's important for you to hear.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's if you're going to run it out of business, that's a whole different conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Is one thing, right? But running a business as a publishing company where you are responsible for the works of other people, like literally, you're responsible for making sure other people's work gets out into the world pretty flawlessly.
Yeah.
Like 0.9% flawlessly, right? I think there's just another level of responsibility when you're a publishing owner than just writer or a published author, right? And I think it helps us both because we're both owners and CEOs as well as authors because we've been through the process. When we're doing these lives and we're sharing this information, it's coming from a level of experience, right? We're not just pulling stuff out of a hat and waving a magic wand,
right?
It's coming from a good level of experience, and it's coming from our own experiences of working with other publishing companies. Like I myself have worked in other publishing companies and have seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and more bad and ugly than good in a lot of cases.
Yes.
I want like people who are listening, and as we grow this community, I want you to know that like we're not going to BS you when it comes to setting up a company. Okay, it's a lot of work.
No,
but
ma'am,
if you
Pam.
About it, you're passionate about people, you're passionate about storytelling, you're passionate about growing diverse voices in this industry, it could be the right business for you. And we're like here, I'm not going to say we're here to coach you, but we're here to be your happy hour friends when you get into.
Yeah, happy hour. Don't get me started, because I mean, this is not close to the drink I would have, but just.
I have coffee, unfortunately. I have coffee and bacon alive. But yeah, it's an enjoyable industry when you are very passionate about it, right?
Yeah.
And for me, like, I'm an individual I'm passionate about content in general. Like, I'm passionate about storytelling and brand building and business building, right? And so I'm not afraid to do that.
I would be, I mean, we would actually be wasting time if we didn't talk about everything.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. We would be wasting your time. We'd be wasting our time. Like, I'm so not, anybody who knows me, I'm a good balance of, I always say this, but I had this shirt that says I'm peace and love, and then in Louisiana we say boot up or shut up, right? That's where you get kind of like, it gets real. I'm a good balance, because normally when people see my posts, it's all encouraging and everything, but I am going to, and I know Danni is too, because we talk to each other like this. We're gonna give you the real, because you need that, and we don't want you to be blindsided, and we right, Melanda? Boot up or shut up. We don't want you to be we don't want you to go into this thinking it's going to be all beautiful, but at the same time, even with the things that are tough, and even with the things you have to fight through, and sometimes not sleep at night because you're worried if, like, you submitted it to KDP and you don't know if it's like, what's taking them so long? Even through
Like that.
yeah, I'm going through that right now. Even through that, you learn so much about yourself.
Yeah, for
and sure. You develop, I don't know, I've changed a lot since I've had this publishing company, and for the better. It gave me more confidence, because I am a steward, just like you, over people's stories, and we are responsible for other people's stories. So it makes me more cautious about how I move, what I say, but it also, even through the tough stuff, made me realize, okay, I can handle this stuff that I thought that I couldn't before. Even in my communication, just being, having emotional intelligence and responding the way that I should, even though sometimes I don't want to that way. Right? It teaches you a lot, and it makes you have more appreciation for words. It makes you have more of an appreciation for the power of words, because words are super powerful, whether you speak it or write it, whatever it is.
Yeah. And to the business side of things, like, there's no real growth without some struggle or something. And I find myself, like, having to tell a good number of people this, like, a lot. I think Instagram, like, platform that we're on it, but social media in general has made the idea of building a business or doing anything, like writing a book, being an influencer, it has made it look like a walk through the park.
Yeah.
It is far from it. So I find myself having to just encourage people, but also tell people, like, there's no growth without pain. I'm not saying that everything has to be painful, but when you get a little bit of pain, or you hit that barrier, or you get to that point of like struggle when you're wanting to give up and you don't, that's when you kind of know you're growing, right? And so,
ooh, girl, you're preaching.
I try to keep that in mind, because for me, running businesses, like, there are days when, like, I can't sleep and don't sleep, right? There are also days when I don't feel like getting up. Like, so it's almost those points where the universe just keeps pressing your buttons, right in the same spot. But I feel like when you don't give up and you keep that confidence and that courage and you keep going in spite of, that's really when you're starting to grow and you're starting to turn a corner. You're starting to become more mature, not as a person, but more mature in your leadership, your writing, your growth, things like that. So yeah, I try to keep that in mind, and I try to remind, people of that as well, that you want to grow, be willing to go through some pain.
Yeah, you got to be willing. We have a comment I'm sharing in appreciation for people's true selves because they are being vulnerable by sharing their written stories. Yeah, super vulnerable.
Yeah.
You are putting yourself all the way out there. I was sharing with somebody who we were having a conversation, and she wants to write a book. And I know I scared her, but I was like, have you had a baby? Like, have you? And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. Because I heard babies in the background. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, okay. So you know how when you go to have the baby, even though you have that robe on, it does not matter. Whether you have a C-section or you are pushing this baby out, you are exposed. You just all the way out there. Like, now it's like when I go to the doctor, they're like, can you? I'm like, yeah, whatever. Because I had 3. So it just doesn't matter. But you are exposed. You are exposed. But it's okay, because that vulnerability, and on the flip side of that, let me say this while I'm thinking about it, because as I'm looking at the comment, even though there are so many very unkind people, right? There are kind people that will say to you, I appreciate your story. Thank you for sharing your story. You'll have people that say, well, why did you say that? Why did you tell that? Or why did you tell the story like this? But you don't, but even with that, there's some, you can find ways to grow from that. Because even if it's an emotional intelligence, whereas before you would have been like, well, what you mean? But now you're like, having a conversation and you go, oh my God, I just handled that way better than I would have handled it before. I'm telling you, whether you are running a publishing company and you're publishing other people's stories, or you are a published author that's running your business, because that's also a business.
Right.
You learn so much about yourself. There's so much opportunity for growth, because I have a whole shirt that says I'm peopled out, because people will make you super tired. But even in that, right, you said it, there's no growth without pain. There's no growth. I want to say it the way you said it, because I love that, because I feel like, did you say change?
No, there's no growth without pain or struggle.
There's no growth. Because if you think about it, when kids are going through growing pains, right, they're stretching. If you're being stretched in your business, ooh, it is. And the reason why I said preach is because you talking to me. Like, this transition that I'm going through, my business is growing. I'm now responsible for other people. I'm not doing it alone anymore, which I'm super thankful for. But in the process of building a team, I've also been doing the work. So I've been like so stretched, and still have a family and still have myself to invest in. So I've been super, super stretched, but I'm thankful because I'm growing.
Yeah.
And I'm handling things differently than I would have just 2 years ago. I just would have been like, I quit. Like, I'm done. Like, listen, y'all publish your own books. I'm done with this. I don't care. I just would have moved on to the next thing. But
yeah, I say that because, like, I have noticed within myself, like, a lot of growth in terms of, like, how I handle people. I'm a person. It don't take a whole lot for me to be like, okay, I'm done with this conversation. I had to say what I had to say. I'm ready to go. It doesn't take a lot, but what takes a lot for me is, like, okay, understanding where people are coming from sometimes, and that because we are human, and because we are diverse, and because we are unique, we're not going to have the same thoughts. We're not going to see things from the same perspective. I might see things one way, whereas my employee might see things completely different, right? A vendor might see something completely different, but we're working on the same project. So I feel like in that sense, it's a lot of emotional intelligence growth, and also growth, the capacity and stability to be able to handle the multitude of concerns and differences that will arise just because you are building a business with people, right? We can't get far without people, but at the same time, I think for us as introverts, like, we have to manage that in a way where we're not seen as rude or, out of line or disrespectful to people. And for me, like, that has probably been, like, the biggest growing pain just having to sit in it with people sometimes.
Yeah, and I think for me it's kind of the same thing. Whereas I always came off as an extrovert and thought I was extroverted, right? I was just like, oh, I'm a social butterfly, like just all over the place, just flapping my little wings and talking to everybody. And then the older I got, I realized that even when I was younger, I wasn't so much of a social butterfly. Like I can do it, but after a while, it's like, oh, I need to be by myself. Yeah, I need to unplug for a while and just be by myself. And I've learned even in business that that's okay. You don't have to be buzzing and social butterflying all over the place if that's not who you are. There's a space for everyone. There's a space for everyone, and even us introverts, because I am an introvert now.
Yeah. I'm an extrovert. I am an introvert. I'm an introvert. I will be extroverted if I have to, but only for a tiny bit of time. Don't expect me to be extroverted all day.
Yeah, and you know what? And that's a good point too, because there's a space for introverts in publishing too. Because for those authors that are not going to, butterfly around. And if you do, please, if you're an extrovert, that's wonderful. You know what I'm saying? I have my moments. Yeah, I have.
Introverts always adopt introverts because we get things done.
Yeah. Right? So I appreciate that, and I have my moments of that too. But I think the world is so set up for extroverts that introverts sometimes feel like there's no space for them. And I have an author specifically that she will not do interviews and things of that nature because she's super introverted, and she would much rather use a pen name and like very different from her own. And I'm like, okay, that's wonderful. Yeah. There's a space for you too. So yes, we want diverse voices from people of color. Yes, we want it from Black people. Yes, we want to hear women. Yes, but I want you to know that introverts also have a space in this diversity realm. Like, you don't have to be, if you don't want to hop on lives and you think that you have to, because as Danni was speaking about social media will make you think that you're supposed to be doing all the things.
And showing up, some of us don't have the capacity to do that.
Yeah. Some of us don't have the capacity, and that's okay. There are many different ways to tell your story and do it in a way that's authentic to you and comfortable for you. Because the last thing you want to do is be forced into something. Where's the creative freedom in that? Where are you going to discover more about yourself if you're not operating as yourself? And so we're holding space for you too.
Absolutely.
I am so excited about us doing this because I think we're going to get some folks that are going to share with us what they really think, and that's what we want. We want to know what you really think because we want to talk about it. We want to talk about what's going on. And as I said, the homework for the next time we pop on is, if you have not published it, why not? What has been your hurdle or your hesitation? Why haven't you published yet? Danni, any last words?
No, I'm excited about where these conversations are going to go. I'm excited for us to take on the responsibility of bridging this gap in diversity and in the financial wellness of this industry as well. And I'm excited in general for storytelling. Like, I'm excited to get new stories on the shelves and inspire people to share more of their stories. So this process, I think we have some projects coming out, which we shall not announce right now, but in the future we will.
Yeah.
I'm excited to work with Keocha. Like, the connection when you meet someone for the first time and you're like, this is the person that I needed in my life, like, all the time.
Aww.
It's amazing, and I would encourage people to like hold space for those people, right? Yeah. They like when you expect it. And good things come when you don't expect it either.
I know. And I feel the very same way about you. Very same way about you. I want to say one of those people who held space for me last week, I think it was. I don't know if she's still on. I know it shows when people pop on, but I don't know if Seema's still on here. But Seema, I just want you to know that I see you and I'm so appreciative for you. Last week I was sharing with her, I think it was last week, just how exhausted I was because y'all, I'm sorry, it's allergies. Just a whole bunch of months of doing a lot of things, plus this transition in business, plus just business altogether.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when she said, well, if you could do something right now, what do we do? And I was like, probably not talk about business. Like, I just need a break from business. But she did. She held space for me to be able to just boohoo, and she listened, and that is what we are offering in this space in publishing. We want to be able to listen. Danni and I are going to take what you say and even go back and say, okay, this is a good topic right here for us to talk about. We see a lot of people are kind of struggling in this area, and so we want to hear from you. We definitely want to hear from you.
Absolutely. Yes.
And I'm so glad we met, and we have all these cool things that's coming up. I think it's gonna, man, I look forward to going to Denver. We'll talk about that later, but we're both planning to go to Denver and be disruptive in the publishing industry in a good way.
Join us. We want to see you there.
Yes, please, let's see you there, and we can get together and disrupt some stuff and look at mountains together. So I look forward to it. But thank you, Danni.
Yay, this was awesome. Guys, I'm telling you, when you meet someone and you put stuff on the calendar and you get it done, so refreshing. So this was an awesome conversation. I'm looking forward to doing this again soon.
Me too. Me too. Well, we'll talk soon. I'm so glad we made it because both of us were like, it's a busy day, and we still got on.
I almost can't want it to be like, oh, wasn't working out.
But we did it. We did it.
But we did.
High five. High five. High five.
We did not.
Well, all right, y'all. We will announce when we pop back on, but come with your questions and your comments. And thank you for joining.
Yes. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.